"You need a home, and I need a daddy," said the little girl to the young homeless man at the bus stop. The bus stop was cold and unwelcoming, a narrow strip of concrete sandwiched between the roar of passing traffic and the flickering glow of a neon sign. He leaned against the metal pole, knees drawn up, jacket thin and worn, the damp wind gnawing at his fingers. His eyes followed the movement of people rushing past, each lost in their own world, each unaware of the weight pressing down on him. Hunger, exhaustion, and the gnawing sense of invisibility had become familiar companions, familiar enough that he hardly noticed them anymore. Then she appeared, a little girl, no more than 7 or 8, standing at the edge of the curb, clutching a ragged stuffed rabbit to her chest. Her eyes were wide, curious, yet brimming with a kind of clarity that only children seem to possess, a clarity that cuts through pretense, discomfort, and fear. She studied him as he sat there, shivering, the thin coat doing little to shield him from the bitter wind. "You need a home," she said suddenly, her voice small but unwavering. He looked up, startled by the directness of her words. There was no malice in her tone, no judgment, only a certainty that stunned him in its simplicity. I'm fine," he stammered, though the lie hung poorly on his lips. His stomach knotted, his throat dry. She tilted her head, the rabbit clutched tighter, and added, "And I need a daddy." The world seemed to pause. The hum of the traffic, the chatter of distant conversations, even the cold wind, all faded into a single, fragile moment of connection. He didn't know how to respond. The absurdity, the impossibility, and yet the purity of her declaration left him breathless. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. There was nothing to say, no explanation that could bridge the gap between her innocence and his broken reality. Yet something stirred within him, a warmth long dormant, a sense of purpose that had been buried under years of survival. She smiled faintly, as if sensing the stirrings of his heart. "I can help," she said, her words soft but resolute. "You just need a place to stay. I can help you find one. We can be a family." For the first time in months, perhaps years, he allowed himself to imagine. He imagined a warm room, a bed to stretch in, a meal not scavenged but cooked and shared. He imagined laughter, small and tender, echoing across walls that were no longer bare. And he imagined the little girl, her trust in him absolute, calling him Daddy in the unfiltered sincerity that only children possess. The next day, he found himself following her small steps as she led him through the city streets. Each turn, each alley, each shop she pointed to, seemed to hold a solution he had never considered. She knew places to eat for free, shelters that offered more than a cot, people who could help without judgment. And though he was hesitant, cautious of disappointment, her unwavering belief began to chip away at the walls he had built around himself. Nights were no longer spent curled on cold benches or in abandoned doorways. Instead, he found temporary refuge in community centers, the warmth of blankets, and the hum of people who treated him as more than a shadow. The little girl never left his side, her tiny hand clasped in his, a tether to hope he had long thought lost. Through her eyes, he began to see the world differently. Acts of kindness that had once seemed fleeting or inconsequential now resonated. The barista who offered a free cup of coffee, the volunteer who smiled and asked his name, the passerby who held the door open, all became markers of a world that, though often harsh, still held spaces for compassion. As days turned into weeks, the bond between them grew. He taught her small things, how to cross the street safely, how to read a map, how to recognize the kindness in strangers. And she taught him the value of unwavering belief, the courage to hope, and the simplicity of trusting in human goodness. One rainy afternoon, as they huddled under a tattered awning, she looked up at him with eyes that seemed far older than her years. "See," she said softly, We can have a home. We just have to keep believing." Her words were a quiet challenge, an insistence that he rise above fear and doubt. And slowly, steadily, he did. He found a small room in a nearby boarding house, modest but sufficient. He secured work that, while humble, allowed him to contribute, to provide, and to reclaim a sense of dignity. And throughout it all, the little girl remained at his side, her laughter, curiosity, and unwavering trust a reminder of the life he had nearly forgotten he could live. Each day, as they shared meals, stories, and quiet moments, he felt the impossible truth settling into his bones. Love, even unexpected, even fragile, could heal. It could mend the invisible fractures life had inflicted. It could warm the coldest nights. It could restore belief in humanity when all else seemed lost. Her simple declaration, so startling in its innocence, so profound in its clarity, had become the compass guiding him out of despair. "You need a home, and I need a daddy," she had said. And in those words, he found a mission, a purpose, and a family he had never imagined possible. The days following their first encounter became a delicate rhythm of survival and tentative hope. He accompanied her as she guided him through the city's hidden network of generosity, shelters, soup kitchens, and kind-hearted strangers who offered assistance without judgment. The little girl seemed to know instinctively where to go, who to trust, and what steps to take, her small hand a tether to possibilities he had long thought impossible. They walked together in silence at first, each step revealing the cracks and crevices of a city that had once felt indifferent. Yet beneath that indifferent exterior lay pockets of warmth, cafes offering leftover bread, volunteers distributing blankets, shopkeepers exchanging nods and small smiles. Each encounter was a thread weaving them closer into the fabric of a community he had never imagined could include him. At night, they shared stories under the dim lights of a shelter, the little girl speaking of dreams she held quietly, almost as if whispering to the universe itself. "I want a daddy," she said one evening, her voice filled with simple sincerity. "Someone to laugh with me, teach me things, and keep me safe." He listened, the weight of her words pressing against the hardened shell he had built over years of neglect and hardship. He realized that her longing was not just for comfort, but for guidance, for the love he had always believed he could not provide. And yet, her trust awakened something dormant, a quiet courage to rise beyond his fears and take on a role he had never thought he could fill. He began searching more earnestly for work, for any opportunity that would allow him to provide for her and himself. The city, which had once seemed a labyrinth of obstacles, now revealed itself in small windows of possibility. Jobs came slowly but steadily. A part-time cleaning position, a delivery task here and there, occasional odd jobs that paid in coins and gratitude. Each task, however modest, reinforced his growing belief that he could rebuild a life worth sharing with the little girl. As weeks passed, he discovered the unexpected resilience within himself. His body, once weakened by hunger and sleepless nights, adapted to routine, effort, and labor. His mind, previously clouded by fear, began to see paths forward, small achievements forming the foundation of a life that had once seemed unattainable. And the little girl, ever observant, celebrated each small success as though it were a triumph of both their lives. On cold evenings, they found shelter in corners of the city that offered warmth, a small cafe with a kind owner, a library that stayed open late, a quiet bus station where security guards allowed them to rest briefly. Each location became a temporary haven, and with each safe night, the fragile seeds of trust and hope grew stronger. She taught him to see the world differently. A discarded wrapper could become a signpost, a stray cat could indicate where warmth was found, and a smile from a stranger could transform despair into cautious optimism. In turn, he taught her about survival, patience, and resilience. The subtle lessons learned through hardship, imparted not with lecture, but with demonstration. One day, while resting on a park bench beneath the bare branches of winter trees, the little girl asked quietly, "Do you think we could have a home someday?" He hesitated, unsure if the word home still held meaning for him. The thought was intoxicating, terrifying, and fragile all at once. Yet when he looked into her earnest eyes, he realized that the hope she carried was infectious. He smiled softly and nodded. "Yes," he said, voice trembling slightly. "We can try." That promise became their compass. Every decision, every step, was guided by the vision of safety, warmth, and belonging. Days were spent navigating the city. Nights were spent resting wherever shelter could be found, and every small act, offering thanks, accepting help, sharing warmth, became part of a delicate chain leading toward the life they imagined together. He began to imagine a real home, a room with a bed, walls that held warmth rather than echoes of despair, and a small table where meals could be shared without fear or shame. The thought, once distant and impossible, began to feel tangible, reachable. And through it all, the little girl's unwavering belief reminded him that miracles often begin in the simplest gestures: a hand held, a look of recognition, a shared moment of trust. Months of effort, persistence, and courage followed. He saved what little he could, took on more reliable work, and learned to navigate the subtle rules of city life with a growing sense of confidence. The little girl, once fragile and cautious, began to shine with the glow of security and companionship. She laughed more freely, asked questions with curiosity, and demonstrated the boundless resilience only a child could possess. And with every passing day, the man realized that life had offered him a second chance, not merely to survive, but to become a source of stability, love, and guidance for someone who believed in him when he had struggled to believe in himself. Winter's grip loosened gradually, and with it came a new rhythm to their lives. The man and the little girl navigated the city streets with growing confidence, each step echoing with the quiet assertion that they belonged, not as shadows, but as participants in the unfolding life around them. He found a small-day job at a neighborhood cafe, washing dishes and cleaning tables, modest work that offered coins for meals and a sense of stability he had not known in years. She accompanied him when she could, her small hand tucked securely into his, a reminder that his responsibilities were no longer just for himself. The little girl's energy transformed their lives. Where he once moved with caution and fatigue, he now moved with attentiveness and care. Her laughter echoed down alleys, drawing smiles from shopkeepers and passers-by. She pointed out things he would have ignored before: a flower sprouting through cracked pavement, a street musician playing a familiar tune, a stray cat curled in warmth on a windowsill. Each observation became a lesson, teaching him to notice beauty, resilience, and possibility even in the harshest environments. At night, they found shelter in a modest boarding house, its worn walls a far cry from luxury, but infinitely preferable to the cold streets. He rented a small room, just enough space for the two of them, and for the first time in years, he slept without fear of being chased from a corner or woken by the gnawing of hunger. She claimed the narrow bed and insisted he take the floor mattress, but he gently insisted she sleep safely while he adjusted. These small negotiations became rituals, subtle expressions of care and responsibility, anchoring them in a shared life. One evening, as he prepared a simple meal of bread and soup, she looked up at him with wide eyes. "Do you think we'll ever have a real home? With walls we can paint and a garden?" He paused, stirring the soup slowly, considering the weight of her question. The idea of a real home had been a distant fantasy, almost laughable in its audacity, yet now it felt attainable, a horizon toward which every small effort was directed. "We'll get there," he promised, his voice steady with conviction he was still learning to trust. "We'll make it ours." Days became weeks, and the rhythm of survival shifted toward growth. He saved diligently, took on extra shifts, and began networking quietly with those who could offer guidance. The little girl, attentive and eager, learned alongside him, absorbing lessons in budgeting, navigation, and subtle city etiquette that would allow them both to thrive. Their bond deepened, evolving beyond necessity into genuine companionship. She became both his guide and his teacher, reminding him of the joy, curiosity, and resilience that had been buried beneath years of hardship. One rainy afternoon, as they huddled beneath a bus shelter, he noticed her shivering despite the coat she wore. Without a word, he wrapped his own jacket around her shoulders, feeling the warmth transfer through fabric and intention. Her eyes met his, wide and trusting, and in that instant, he understood that every sacrifice, every effort, and every small step was for her, and for the life they were building together. The city, once oppressive and indifferent, began to feel alive with possibility. He discovered quiet moments of generosity that he had never noticed. A woman handing out sandwiches to the homeless, a shopkeeper offering a free coffee, a neighbor pausing to share encouragement. Each instance of human kindness reaffirmed the lessons he had learned, that the world, though harsh, contained threads of hope woven into the daily lives of those willing to act with care. Months passed, and their routines solidified. He learned to anticipate challenges, to manage resources, and to offer guidance that was gentle yet firm. She, in turn, exhibited patience, empathy, and understanding beyond her years, supporting him in ways subtle but profound, offering reassurance when doubt threatened, asking insightful questions that guided decisions, and celebrating every small victory as though it were monumental. One day, a neighbor introduced him to a social worker who specialized in housing for vulnerable families. The man hesitated, wary of promises that often proved hollow, yet the little girl's enthusiasm was infectious. "We can do it, can't we?" she asked, her hand tightening around his. He nodded, feeling the surge of determination she inspired, and together, they embarked on the next stage of their journey toward stability. Through persistence, patience, and unwavering belief, he navigated the bureaucratic maze, securing temporary housing and eventually a modest apartment that would become their first true home. It was small, with peeling paint and a creaky floor, but to them, it represented sanctuary, safety, and the culmination of months of effort and hope. As they moved in, the little girl's eyes shone with delight. "It's ours," she whispered, running her hands along the walls. "A real home." He smiled, a rare warmth spreading through him. It was more than a building. It was proof of what they had endured and achieved together. It was the manifestation of trust, resilience, and the transformative power of connection. The apartment, modest and worn, became a sanctuary over the following weeks. Each corner was touched with intention, each object placed with care, and each day unfolded with a rhythm of stability the man had never known. Mornings were spent preparing simple breakfasts, the aroma of toast and tea filling the small space, the little girl chattering with excitement as she helped set the table. He watched her, marveling at the resilience and joy she radiated, realizing that her trust had transformed him more profoundly than he could have imagined. They established routines that brought structure and purpose. He went to work each day at the cafe, returning with coins earned honestly, while she attended a nearby school, her small backpack swinging with excitement and determination. Evenings were devoted to shared learning and storytelling. He taught her reading, numbers, and the quiet lessons of patience and responsibility, while she reminded him of the beauty in small things, the laugh of a bird outside the window, the way sunlight glimmered on puddles, or the thrill of discovering a new street in their neighborhood. One rainy afternoon, they huddled together near the window, watching droplets cascade down the glass. She whispered, "Do you think anyone will ever know we made it?" He smiled, recognizing the profound innocence and hope in her question. "We may not," he said softly, "but that doesn't matter. What matters is that we did it, for us." Their bond deepened in ways neither had anticipated. She relied on him not merely for safety, but for guidance, support, and reassurance. He, in turn, relied on her trust, her unwavering belief in him, and the gentle insistence that he rise above fear and self-doubt. Together, they formed a small universe of care, resilience, and shared dreams, each day building a foundation stronger than walls or roofs alone could provide. Challenges arose, of course. Bills, repairs, and the ongoing struggle to maintain income pressed upon them. But the lessons of hardship had prepared him well. He navigated each obstacle with careful planning, patience, and ingenuity. Every difficulty became an opportunity to teach the little girl about resilience and problem-solving, showing her that life's challenges could be met with determination, kindness, and hope. He also began to reach out to the community, volunteering at shelters and offering guidance to others experiencing homelessness. His past, once a source of shame, became a bridge to empathy, allowing him to connect deeply with those struggling. He realized that his journey was no longer solitary. It extended outward, touching lives through acts of generosity, encouragement, and quiet support. The little girl observed these acts closely. Her admiration was evident, not in words, but in the way she mirrored his compassion in her own small gestures, sharing her snacks with classmates, helping neighbors carry groceries, offering comfort to those who seemed alone. She was learning that kindness, no matter how small, ripples outward, and he took pride in witnessing her growth. One afternoon, while walking home from school, she turned to him and said softly, "We're really a family now, aren't we?" He hesitated, feeling the weight and beauty of her declaration. "Yes," he said finally, his voice steady. "We are." That affirmation became a quiet anchor. Each day, each shared meal, each bedtime story reinforced their bond. He was no longer just a man who had survived hardship. He was a father figure, a protector, a mentor, and a source of love. And she, in her pure, unfiltered trust, gave him purpose beyond survival, a reason to strive, to grow, and to invest fully in a life they could share. They began to decorate their apartment together, adding splashes of color, small drawings, and personal touches that made the space truly theirs. It was more than a room. It was a canvas for hope, creativity, and belonging. The little girl's laughter filled the air, echoing against walls that had once only contained silence, and he felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought them here. Through their shared experiences, the man discovered the transformative power of connection. He learned that love and trust could heal wounds far deeper than the body, that belief in another could awaken strengths long dormant, and that family was not solely defined by blood, but by care, commitment, and shared life. As winter gave way to spring, their lives flourished. Flowers appeared along window sills, sunlight warmed their mornings, and the city, once intimidating and harsh, became a landscape of possibility, community, and beauty. Every interaction, every small victory, every act of care reinforced the life they were building together, one of love, resilience, and shared dreams. And through it all, he never forgot the moment that had begun it all, the small girl at the bus stop, eyes wide with certainty, words that cut through despair. "You need a home, and I need a daddy." That moment, simple yet profound, had redirected the course of his life, offering hope, purpose, and the possibility of family when he had believed it beyond reach. Spring settled fully over the city, and with it came a renewed sense of energy and purpose for the man and the little girl. Their routines, once precarious, had become structured and sustaining. Each morning, he prepared breakfast while she helped set the table, her small hands moving with the careful attentiveness of someone invested in a shared life. Outside, the world moved fast, but inside their modest apartment, a rhythm of safety, warmth, and belonging prevailed. Work at the cafe had become reliable. He knew the rhythm of the kitchen, the smiles of regular customers, the subtle cues that allowed him to anticipate needs before they were voiced. Each paycheck, however small, was a tangible reminder of his growing stability, and he used every coin with care, saving, budgeting, and investing in the small comforts that made a home feel real. The little girl thrived in school, her curiosity boundless, her joy infectious. She asked questions constantly about the world, about people, about life itself. He answered patiently, sometimes unsure, sometimes learning alongside her. Their conversations stretched long into the evening, their voices filling the small apartment with warmth and a sense of continuity. One afternoon, as they walked through the park on a quiet street lined with budding trees, she stopped suddenly and looked up at him. "Do you think we could adopt a pet?" she asked, eyes shining with hope. He paused, considering the responsibility, the additional cost, and the delicate balance of their lives. Yet he saw in her gaze the same clarity and determination she had first shown at the bus stop. He smiled gently. "Yes," he said, "we can take care of a little one together." That evening, they visited a nearby animal shelter and found a small, timid puppy with fur as soft as a cloud. The little girl laughed, and her voice rang clear and joyous, the sound more healing than any medicine. He watched her hold the puppy carefully, guiding it gently, seeing in her care the reflection of the trust and love she had placed in him. The puppy became part of their small family, another bond formed in a life that had once been fragmented and lonely. The man continued to reach outward, offering help to others as he had once received it. He shared his story sparingly, but his presence alone became a quiet beacon for those navigating hardship. People noticed his patience, his attentiveness, and the unwavering compassion he offered, even in small acts, a warm meal, guidance, or simply listening. The ripple of kindness extended beyond what he could see, shaping lives quietly, invisibly, yet profoundly. Evenings were filled with ritual and reflection. He read aloud to the little girl from books he could afford at the local library, teaching her words, stories, and morals that stretched her imagination and understanding. She asked about distant lands, people with different lives, and challenges he could scarcely imagine. Together, they explored these worlds on the wings of imagination, each story reinforcing the sense of security and belonging they had painstakingly built. Occasionally, he found moments to reflect on his own journey, the nights of hunger, the cold streets, the despair that had once seemed permanent. And yet, those memories no longer carried shame or hopelessness. They were markers of resilience, proof of endurance, and reminders of the miraculous encounter that had redirected his life. That little girl at the bus stop, her simple words, had been the spark, the catalyst for transformation, and he honored that gift daily through his actions and care. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the city skyline, he helped the little girl with her homework at the small kitchen table. She paused, pencil in hand, and looked up at him earnestly. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice gentle but sincere. "For everything." He felt a lump in his throat, a mixture of pride, gratitude, and love that words could scarcely contain. He reached across the table and gently held her hand. "No," he said softly. "Thank you for trusting me, for believing in us, and for giving me a family when I thought I had none." That night, as they settled into bed. The little girl tucked safely beneath blankets, the puppy curled at her feet. He gazed out the window at the city lights, feeling a quiet sense of fulfillment. The apartment, modest and imperfect, had become a home. The bonds they shared had become family, and the once fragile hope had matured into steadfast belief that they could face any challenge together. Through every step of hardship, every small victory, and every quiet act of love, the man realized the profound truth he had long forgotten. Life's miracles often arrive not through grandeur or wealth, but through connection, trust, and the courage to embrace possibility. And the little girl, in her simplicity, had reminded him of the transformative power of faith, hope, and unconditional trust. Summer stretched long over the city, bathing streets in golden light that glimmered off windows and asphalt alike. The man and the little girl moved through it with increasing confidence, their steps deliberate but unhurried, their lives settling into a rhythm that was neither frantic nor fearful. Their modest apartment had become a sanctuary of sorts, but the promise of a brighter, more permanent home lingered in their minds like a horizon waiting to be reached. The little girl thrived with a mixture of wonder and determination. School became a place of curiosity and learning, each lesson an opportunity to explore, understand, and grow. She ran to him after classes, her face alight with questions, small discoveries, and the kind of joy that only unburdened children possess. He answered each query patiently, sometimes unsure, sometimes learning alongside her. Every exchange deepened their bond, reinforcing the delicate balance of trust, care, and shared growth that had become their foundation. Their daily routines expanded. Mornings were filled with the preparation of breakfast, small conversations, and quiet plans for the day. Afternoons were devoted to work, study, and modest errands, tasks that, in combination, slowly built the scaffolding of stability. Evenings became a time of shared reflection, sometimes with homework, sometimes with quiet storytelling, and occasionally with walks through parks where sunlight filtered softly through the trees. The man had grown accustomed to responsibility in ways he had never anticipated. Each decision, from budgeting and meal planning to ensuring safety and comfort, carried the weight of their shared future. Yet in that weight, he found purpose, a clarity of being, and a quiet joy that had been absent in the harsh, lonely years before the little girl had appeared. She had given him more than a role. She had given him a reason to believe in his own worth. They encountered small challenges that tested their resolve. A sudden illness, a delayed paycheck, and minor accidents in the apartment reminded them of life's unpredictability. But each obstacle became a lesson, a moment to teach patience, resilience, and creative problem-solving. The little girl watched him navigate difficulty with determination, absorbing the subtleties of perseverance and responsibility with the clarity only a child's eyes can render. Through the city streets, they discovered a network of kindness. Neighbors offered assistance in small, meaningful ways, sharing extra vegetables, offering rides during rainstorms, or lending advice from experience. These moments, subtle but profound, reminded them both that the world could be harsh, yet still contained pockets of compassion waiting to be recognized and nurtured. The man began dreaming bigger, imagining a home where laughter, warmth, and permanence were not fleeting but enduring. He explored options, considered modest apartments, and researched local programs to secure long-term housing. Each plan, each calculation, was driven by the desire to provide not only shelter but stability, safety, and the promise of growth for the little girl who had transformed his life. The little girl, perceptive and intuitive, noticed the shift in him. "Are we getting closer?" she asked one evening as they watched the city lights from their window. He smiled softly, squeezing her hand. "Every day," he said. "Every day, we're closer." In quiet moments, They reflected on their journey. From the cold bus stop where their paths had first crossed, to the streets that had tested and shaped them, to the modest apartment that had become their temporary home. The arc of their story had been guided by trust, hope, and the transformative power of connection. Each small act of kindness, each shared moment, had built toward a future still just out of reach, yet increasingly tangible. The bond between them deepened. He recognized that fatherhood was not merely about providing, but about presence, patience, and guidance. She, in turn, absorbed the lessons of empathy, courage, and resilience, internalizing values that would shape her for life. Together, they became a living testament to the quiet, persistent influence of care and trust. Summer evenings were filled with laughter, quiet conversations, and plans for the future. They discussed aspirations, both modest and grand, envisioning a home where their lives could flourish fully. Each dream, no matter how small, became a beacon, guiding their daily choices and infusing their journey with meaning. The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains, casting a warm glow across the small apartment. The man stirred, feeling a sense of calm he had not known in years. Across the room, the little girl was already awake, her eyes bright with excitement and anticipation. Today was different. Today marked a milestone in their journey, the moment when hope and determination would finally converge into the reality they had dreamed of. They walked together through the familiar streets, hand in hand, each step carrying the weight of past struggles and the promise of new beginnings. The city, once imposing and indifferent, now seemed alive with possibility, every corner offering a quiet reminder that they belonged. The little girl's laughter rang out, a melody of joy that resonated with the man's heart, warming even the coldest memories of nights spent in uncertainty. At last, they arrived at a modest apartment building, one that had felt distant and unattainable only months before. The man signed the lease, hands trembling slightly with the gravity of the moment. The little girl watched with wide eyes, understanding only in part the significance of the action, yet sensing fully the joy and relief that accompanied it. The key turned in the lock, and the door opened to a space that was empty but filled with promise. They stepped inside together, feeling the walls echo with possibility. Each room offered potential, each corner a canvas for the life they would now create. The man set down his bag and took a deep breath, inhaling not just air, but the culmination of hope, effort, and perseverance. They spent the day arranging their new home, placing furniture, hanging simple decorations, and filling the space with small touches that reflected their personalities and shared journey. The little girl ran from room to room, exploring, laughing, and occasionally stopping to hug him tightly. He smiled, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that the home was more than bricks and walls. It was the embodiment of love, trust, and resilience. That evening, they shared a simple meal at the small table, the puppy nestled at the little girl's feet, content and safe. As they ate, he looked at her, the weight of months past pressing gently against his heart. "We did it," he said softly, voice thick with emotion. "We made it through together." She smiled, her small hand reaching across the table to touch his. "We're a family now," she said simply, and the words carried more meaning than anything he could have imagined. They had endured hunger, uncertainty, and the harshness of the streets. They had faced fear, doubt, and loneliness. And through it all, they had held on to each other, trusting in the possibility of love, connection, and hope. In the quiet of their new home, they shared stories, laughter, and dreams for the future. He realized that the little girl had given him more than companionship. She had given him purpose, the courage to believe again, and the understanding that family is defined not by circumstance, but by love, trust, and shared commitment. As night fell and the city lights shimmered through the windows, he reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from a cold bus stop where a single, simple statement had sparked change, to a home filled with warmth, laughter, and the quiet miracle of belonging. The little girl curled up beside him, the puppy nestled at her feet, and for the first time in years, he felt truly whole. If this story touched your heart, remember that even the smallest acts of kindness can transform lives. Subscribe to Blessed Soul Stories for more tales of hope, resilience, and the extraordinary power of human connection. Every story reminds us that miracles are possible when love, trust, and belief guide our actions.